fellow South Africans and members of the media. The violence, looting and destruction of key infrastructure that was reported mainly in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal has continued overnight throughout the day today. We are, however, getting positive reports that the deployment of additional law enforcement agencies is starting to reap positive results, as we are seeing less incidents of violence and looting reported. Currently, 5,000 members of the South African National Defence Force have already deployed on the ground. Law enforcement officers supported by the military are working tirelessly to ensure that the country returns to peace and stability, and that those responsible for the instability are quickly brought to book. Different ministers have also been tasked to undertake monitoring visits to different areas where the violence and looting has been reported, to assess the situation and to call for calm and for all members of the community. As the situation stands, there are 208 incidents across the country that have been reported overnight. In Gauteng, the number is 52, and in KwaZulu-Natal is 156, where shopping malls and centers have been looted and vandalized. With the looting of the shopping malls and centers, the community members are raising concerns of food shortages and stoppage of key economic activities. There are also reports of panic buying by members of the public. We urge members of the public to remain calm and exercise restraint during these trying times. Government is working with the National Consumer Goods Council to ensure food security. If we have members of the public flocking into the shops and malls to buy foodstuff, we are also risking the spread of COVID-19, and it will go to uncontrollable levels with the Delta variant that is currently prevalent in our country. Another area of concern that has been brought into the attention of government is members of the community taking up arms to try and protect their properties. We understand the concern for community for their safety and their need to protect their properties. We would like to urge these communities to work with the law enforcement agencies to stop the looting and violence and to operate within the rule of law. If we have everybody taking up arms, we stand a risk of having unruly elements also hijacking the noble efforts of the community. Fellow South Africans, we also want to caution members of the media and community not to release or circulate sensitive information on the investigations on identified suspects who are behind the violence and the looting. The situation will jeopardize sensitive investigations which are ongoing, and it can affect the judicial process. We therefore appeal for responsible reporting and sharing of sensitive information. Later in the day, we'll release the WhatsApp number and the email address where members of the public can report those who are instigating the violence in their community. In conclusion, the government is working with different sectors to ensure that we bring to an end the looting and violence. We all need to speak with one voice to condemn the lawlessness and to work together to ensure that we root out this scourge in our communities. Government appreciates the support of South Africans who have resoundingly rejected the destruction of their beautiful country. The business sector, both big and small, who have partnered with their government to ensure continued operation of the South African economy and critical supplies. The political leadership from across all political parties who are represented in our parliament for putting aside political differences for the benefit of our beloved country. The traditional leadership and interfaith leaders who have offered to reach out to their communities and ensure that safety prevails in our country. Thank you. Kabadzulapo bote ba South Africa na boramafhungo bashu ri khou ṱoḓa u ḓivhadza zori u tshinyadzwa ha ndaka na utshinyi ho itiwaho hu khou itwa shangoni lashu ho ḓi bvela phanḓa kana hu kha ḓi bvela phanḓa fhano shangoni lashu nga maanḓesa provinceni ya Gauteng kana kha vunḓu ḽa Gauteng na ḽa KwaZulu-Natal. Mara zwino ri khou thoma u wana mivhigo yo no khou khwaṱhisedza uri vhudziki vhu khou thoma u vha hone kha shango lashu musi masole bo swika na musi ro engedza tshivhalo tsha vho ramilayo kana vhathu vho enforcer kana vho langa ndango ya shango uri vha kone u shuma vhoṱhe. Ri tshi khou amba zwino masole ono swika 5000 ono vha hone fhasi a khou shuma. Ri khou ṱoḓa u khwaṱhisedza zwori vhathu vhashu vha vhupileli na vha u ḓisa vhudziki shangoni vha khou shuma uri situation kana nyimele ya shango i vhuyele kha ngona nga u ṱavhanya. Ro rumela na dzi minister dzo fhambananaho fhethu ho fhambananaho uri vha yo cheka kana u sedzulusa tshinyalelo yo iteaho no cheka uri hu khou itea mini kha afho hune a pfhi ndi hone tshidzivhini tsha u tshinya kha shango. Ri tshi khou amba ro rali kha vunḓu ḽa Gauteng ho vha na zwiwo zwo no swika 52, kha ḽa KwaZulu-Natal ho vha na zwiwo zwa 156 henezwo u tshinya mashopo na u tshinya dzi senthara dzine dza vha na zwiḽiwa. Zwo ṱanganezwo zwiwo zwi ita 208. Hu tshi khou tshinyadziwa mashopo na dzi senthara dza zwiḽiwa, huna vhathu vho no khou thoma u vhilela uri zwiḽiwa zwi ḓo fhela, vha khou thoma u takuwa vha tshi o renga zwiḽiwa nga u ṱavhanya. Ri khou nga u ḓadza ri khou khombela vhathu ni songo tshuwa, ri khou shuma sa muvhuso na vha mavhengele vhano vha responsible kho rengisa zwiḽiwa uri lushaka lwashu luvhe na zwiḽiwa. So ni songo dzhaya na ya mavhengeleni na ri ni khou ngo renga ngori zwiḽiwa zwi ḓo fhela, zwiḽiwa a zwi nga fheli. Na dzhaya na ya mavhengeleni roṱhe ri ḓo fukisa tshiḽa tshitzhili tsha coronavirus tshine tsha vha Delta variant yene a khou vhonala fhano shangoni ḽashu. Ri khou dovha ra vhiledzwa nga u dzhia mulayo ra u vhea zwanḓani zwashu zwa tshitshavha. Ri khou humbela uri vhathu vha tshitshavha vho no khou ḓo tsireledza ndaka dzavho na matshilo avho kha vha shume na mapholisa uri hu tsireledzo hedzo ndaka, ngauri arali vha sa shuma na mapholisa ra dzhia mulayo ra u vhea zwanḓani zwashu hu ḓo vha na mahokoko kana havha vhane vha khou ita mimuya mivhi hafha shangoni ḽashu vho no ḓo dzhenelela vha tshinya zwivhuya zwine ra khou ita nga u tsireledza shango ḽashu, vha ri ndi vigilantism. Ri tshi khou fhedzisela ri ḓo ḓivhadza ḓuvha ḽi sathu kovhela WhatsApp number na email address ine vhathu vha nga rumela khayo u ripota vhathu vho no khou khosa instability vhuponi ha vhorine. Ri khou humbela uri vhathu vha songo dzhia information kana mafhungo a uri ndi nnyi ono khou khosa dzikhakhathi mivhunduni yavho mahayani avho vha i ḓisa kha dzi social media kana vha isa gai zwi tshinya dzi ṱhoḓuluso dza mapholisa na u tshinya u konadzea ha u fariwa, not only u fariwa na u tshutshisiwa nga vha milayo. Ri khou humbela u livhuwa vhathu vha South Africa vhoṱhe vhe vha takutshedza vha hana nga ipfhi ḽihulu nga u pfana uri vhone a vha ṱoḓi tshinyalelo ḽa shango ḽavho. Ri khou dovha ra livhuwa vhoramabindu vhoṱhe vhahulwane vha mabindu mahulwane na mabindu maṱuku vho partneraho na vho faranaho na muvhuso wavho uri ikonomi ya shango i ḓi tshimbila na uri zwithu dzi supplies dza critical zwi nonga zwiḽiwa na mishonga zwi vhe hone shangoni ḽashu. Ri khou dovha ra livhuwa vha mahoro a dzipolitiki ene a vha hone phalamendeni yashu nge vha tenda u vhea dzi difference kana u sa pfana hashu lwa polotiki thungo uri ri pfane ri tsireledze no fhaṱa shango ḽashu. Ri khou livhuwa na vhahosi ashu na vharangaphanḓa vha vhureleli vho farisanaho na muvhuso uri vha ye zwitshavhani zwine vha vharangaphanḓa hone uri vha kaidze zwithu zwo ḓisa tshinyalelo. Ri khou livhuwa. Are there any questions that we must field? Before we start, let's agree on the number so that we don't have too many at one time. Okay.
When members of the cabinet go to KZN, where the situation has not yet subsided as much as it has in Gauteng. And questions from Chinai Nyoka from BBC. What what is the updated death toll, and what is the updated number of arrests. And I have a question from Janice Roberts from Media 24. The question is, what message do you have for local and foreign corporate investors who are now worried about the situation? What long-run changes can you promise to prevent this flaring up again and again, given unemployment will remain very high? Could you take those words for now, Minister?
Okay. Thank you for the questions. There are ministers who are deployed in KZN. They may not be visiting malls, but they are engaging with political parties there. They are also engaging with community leaders there. We can give examples. Minister Dlamini Zuma, she is in KZN amongst others. The other ministers are also there, but the ministers are already in KZN. And the ministers in the economic cluster, they have a program which they will announce, which they are rolling out, of assessing the impact in all the provinces that are affected, in particular Gauteng and KZN. It should happen before the end of this week. In terms of the death toll, the numbers, we don't want what happened yesterday to have different numbers. The police are still verifying the numbers and confirming the tally between Gauteng and KZN, so that number will be released earlier as we release the last statement of the day. And in terms of arrest, maybe let me report it this way. Out of the 52 incidences in Gauteng, 219 cases have been opened and 686 arrests have been effected. And in KZN, out of the 156 incidences, 464 cases have been opened and 1,068 arrests have been effected. In terms of the question around local and foreign investment, as I've indicated, the government is already working with the businesses that are in South Africa to make sure that we stabilize the situation. We've got confidence that the situation will be handled quickly and the threat on investment will be minimized. We cannot disregard that the investments in South Africa would be slightly affected, but we are confident about their rebuilding of the economy and the partnership with South African businesses who have stayed the course and are true patriots in making sure that we rebuild this economy, not only from the scourge of the violence now, but also from the impact of the COVID-19 disaster. And in terms of long-term programs, the government had already started working in partnership with the private sector, labor, and communities on rebuilding the economy. And that rebuilding of the economy, we are fully aware that unemployment, in particular of the young people, is a serious problem that remains a ticking time bomb. But we are working not only to create jobs for the youth, but also to partner with the youth to support them to start their own businesses, to make sure that we create a generation not only of job seekers, but a generation of job creators, a generation of those who own the means of production and who owns the economy. But part of the problem that we have is that as long as the country does not have access to vaccines, we will not be able to rebuild the economy quick enough. As long as the continent of Africa is still limited to have access to vaccines, we will have a problem of rebuilding the economy of the continent. And therefore, our plea to the international community and developed countries that release the vaccines now, allow the TRIPS waiver now, so that we can have access to the vaccines. It cannot be fair that you are vaccinating your 12-year-olds where the working class in Africa and in South Africa on its own cannot be vaccinated or cannot be vaccinated quick enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. I'll proceed with the initial questions. Questions from Kate Davis from Leaders News. Minister says, can you respond to the allegations regarding Khumbudzo? And also, it's asked, when do you foresee the reopening of N3 between Joburg and Durban? Is it still controlled by truck drivers? And what is the immediate plan to ensure food, medicine, and fuel security in KZN and other affected areas? And what is the latest and best information held by the state as to who is destroying the infrastructure, and what's behind this? And another child from News 24.
You are reading too fast. I can't follow. I've missed you on the N3 reopening. I got that, but after that, I didn't get the question.
Okay. The next question is, what is the immediate plan to ensure food, medicine, and fuel security in KZN and other affected areas? And what is the latest, best information held by the state as to who is destroying the infrastructure and what's behind this? And another child, 24, says regarding the 5,000 SANDF soldiers initially, the deployment was 2,500 soldiers. When were the additional soldiers deployed? Can you give an indication of where they have been stationed? And also ask, can you...
I thought we agreed on 5 questions.
Okay, Mr. Ashton.
Thank you for the questions. On the allegations regarding Thulani Dlomo, they are matters of state security. The Department of State Security is handling that, and we'll leave it at that. In terms of the reopening of N3, we must clarify the N3 is not on the control of truck drivers. There has been an arrangement given the incidences of violence against the truckers who were ferrying goods to the port and from port that were being under attack, that a transfer arrangement will be done to make sure that goods that are from port to inland will come through, and then goods from the Durban port in particular, and then goods from inland that has to go to the port will be transported. The security and law enforcement agencies are working with the private sector to make sure arrangements are in place to make sure the transfers are done as soon as possible. We had agreed that they will be escorted as they move, but therefore it will mean they must move at particular times and under escort. Those arrangements are underway, but there are no truck drivers that are controlling the N3. There were threats to the truck drivers and the trucks as they were passing through. In terms of security of food, medicine and fuel, not in KZN and other provinces, I must indicate that Minister Mantashe, who is the Minister of Mineral Energy and Energy Resources, has issued a ministerial directive to stop the sale of fuel on portable containers to avoid the abuse of fuel for nefarious means, but also that the military are guarding critical infrastructure to make sure there is no threat to the fuel pipelines, to make sure there is fuel security. We have indicated in our statement that we are working with the National Consumer Goods Council to make sure that there is food security and to make sure that there is food supplies. We are going to announce jointly with them, but currently there is no shortage of food. The stores have been closed because of the looting and that protection, but there is sufficient food to make sure everybody is covered in the country. We'll never allow a situation where South Africans do not have access to food. In terms of the question around what is the best information we have about those who are perpetrating or instigating this violence, and what is behind it. What I can confirm is that it is an economic sabotage, it's violence, but we are not at liberty to announce who is behind it, because if we do that, we'll jeopardize investigation and successful prosecution of the cases. I missed the question on there was another question which I missed. If you can start with the last question that I was supposed to answer and go to the next ones.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. The last question is regarding the 5,000 SANDF soldiers who are initially deployed, and there was 2,500 soldiers, and the question is when were the additional soldiers deployed, and can you give an indication of where they can where they have been stationed?
Thank you. Yesterday, when we did a briefing of the ministers of the Justice Crime Prevention Cluster, we indicated that it was 2,500 that was initially planned, because the process of mobilizing the military to deploy is not as easy as people think. You just don't say now and it happens now. They are in different military barracks, is different units and platoons that they have to be mobilized. But overnight, the deployment continued as we indicated yesterday, and as we speak, the 5,000 are on the ground. We cannot say where, because that will jeopardize their ability to be effective, but they are spread across the hotspots. We have gotten feedback from the business communities to say they have interacted with the soldiers, they've been there, they are supporting them, but critical infrastructure is secured, including those centers that we think will jeopardize continued economic activity and also food security. We can't take questions forever, so we need to agree and prioritize the questions. Those that are repeated, you must avoid. Even if they repeat in different terminology, we must keep them. They would have been covered, but then we must then prioritize, because we can't be speaking here forever. We must indicate that this media briefing is going to be standard, and as long as the situation permeates, and we'll keep the media updated, and we'll issue a media statement every morning to make sure that whatever happened overnight is captured and clarified from a government perspective, and also where possible in the evening, if there are certain things that could not have been covered that have developed after this media briefing, they will be updated in a late media statement.
Questions?
Go ahead.
Alan Sekoba from Business Day is asking, what is the government doing to protect the harbors in Durban and Richards Bay, where work has come to a stop? How does it ensure workers and infrastructure are protected and keep working? These are critical for the economy. Christian Duplessis from Network 24. A lot of officials have referred to the violence having a racial and ethnic element. Can the minister please clarify how this fits into the picture? And then I have John De Lange from Rapport. The law enforcers clearly don't have the capacity to bring the violence under control in KZN. Don't they need to extend powers of detention without trial? Why didn't government declare a state of emergency? And just another two. From another one's from Teto Matlakwana from Eyewitness News. Was the police incapacitated to deal with the looters and rioters, or merely lacked the intelligence to be at the right place at the right time? And Christian Duplessis from Daily Maverick. Yesterday, the National Police Commissioner said there is a plan to drop off supplies for police, etc. This morning on SAFM, a police officer called in and says they are forced to confront crowds with a ration of 9 rubber bullets and 2 stun grenades. He says they are extremely demoralized. Has this situation improved for police? How and when? And another question of last one, Minister, I think, because there's quite a lot. It's from Awina Dumago from SAPC. The security cluster has been heavily criticized for lying low during these riots. Why only come out today, as we have seen several ministers in Gauteng? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. The question around the protection of harbors in Durban and Richards Bay, as we have indicated, the harbors and are critical infrastructure. They have been protected. The question of when are we getting them to function better or to go back to normality, as soon as the situation has stabilized, they will go back to normality. In terms of the racial and ethnic element of the violence, we must indicate that South Africans have resoundingly said they are not tribalism. There's no tribalism in this country, and they don't want to be classified. There's no superior tribe, and there's no junior tribe. There are no those who are entitled to be in South Africa. We are all South Africans. We are equal. We are one nation. And in incidences, the royal family of AmaZulu were speaking earlier before us. Part of the reasons we delayed our start is to allow the royal family to speak, and they've cautioned that the signs of racial tensions between the Indian community and the African community in KZN must not take force. And those who know South Africa, those tensions are not starting now. Wherever there are problems in the country, there's that a bit of a flare up. But what is pleasing in terms of the political leadership, the ministers who are on the ground and engaging with the communities, both the African community and also the Indian community, there is an acknowledgement that, and they are working together to make sure those tensions are subsided and they are not the situation is not hijacked for wrong means, because there are those amongst us who would want to instigate that racial divisions in the country. It's not new. We're still healing from our racial divisions of the past, and therefore we cannot ignore that those tensions may flare up a bit and there, but it's the responsibility of leadership to come in, and the traditional leadership of the Zulu nation has come out to condemn that, and the leadership of the Indian community has also come out and condemned that, and they are jointly working together. I was part of a meeting yesterday with the leadership there, that they are working together to make sure the situation is stabilized. And in terms of I won't answer the question around powers of detention, extending the powers of detention, because it was dealt with yesterday. It was clarified that within the law, there is enough capacity to deal with the current situation. We don't need extra measures in that state. And in terms of the state of emergency, the government is assessing the situation. As the deployments improve, the numbers increase, then the situation stabilizes or gets out of hand, a decision will be taken by the state president of whether to declare or not to declare a state of emergency. Whether SAPS was incapacitated or whether there was lack of intelligence. We must recall that this situation is not happening during a normal time. It's happening in an environment wherein we've got COVID-19, and we took a decision as government that the workplace must be minimized. Some are working in the public service, we are working at 40%, and also within the SAPS, that decision was effected. You'll recall that the provincial commissioner of KZN had to issue a directive to recall people who were made to stay home because of managing the numbers on the ground. But secondly, also members of the South African Police Service are affected and infected by COVID-19. So that also impacts the response. But in addition, we should not forget our immediate past, where the police are used to the kind of protest that we have had, where South Africans have a right to exercise their freedom, to announce through protest, express their unhappiness through protest, and that which has never been violent. So we thought the numbers, as it started the situation, the numbers were enough to deal with a normal demonstration of unhappiness with one thing or the other. But we realized that that is not the situation. It's economic. It's the intelligence community that have provided us with that information, and the police have responded quite adequately with the numbers they had at hand, and they've moved rapidly to recall those who were made to stay at home to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of supplies for police, like I've indicated, the same response will apply, that the supplies will not have been enough because we had not planned for that type of violent. It's not even, they are not demonstrations. There are people who are conducting economic sabotage, who are orchestrating and planning the attacks. If you look at how the mosques have been attacked, those are clear, orchestrated and planned, and the capacity of the state will come in heavy on those who are instigating. And the issue around the security cluster lying low, the security cluster has not lied low. The security cluster had to plan a response, and that's why yesterday they came out and responded. Today, the ministers that are on the ground are ministers of the economic cluster, and some from the security cluster, but it is the economic cluster that is assessing. The security cluster have to deal with the situation at hand of making sure that peace and stability is restored in the country. They cannot be going around. They must be planning. They must be reviewing the situation minute by minute, hour by hour, and make the adjustments to the security plans. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. We'll meet tomorrow.
Thank you. This brings us to the end of the briefing. As the Minister has indicated, the South African government will be giving regular briefings to the public, and we want the public to be informed, but also to assist the government in maintaining it. This brings us to the end of this briefing, and thank you very much.